Morning, everybody. Brian Neubert here again from goldandblack.com. Trapped in a confined space, a room turned upside down, once again in the middle of a painting project that hopefully will be done sometime soon. But once again, sitting here in my own mess. This is your goldandblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast for Wednesday, April 29th, according to my computer. It's brought to you by Follett's Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remax Ability Plus. Want to remind you once again, if you're looking for dinner or just to support our local businesses, please keep in mind the 6th Street Dive Restaurant in Lafayette, Arnie's in West Lafayette, and all over the state, Bruno's in West Lafayette, and the Whitaker Inn in West Lafayette, all of which remain open for carryout orders, and I'm sure would love to hear from you, so please keep them in mind. As you know, we're doing this thing every day where I just talk about a topic related to Purdue, although we may be venturing into waters unrelated to Purdue at some point in time, and soliciting feedback from readers, listeners, viewers, whatever platform you might be ingesting this in. About potential topics to discuss. And a topic that was suggested to me by multiple people was Purdue's center position for basketball next season. Obviously, a position in a little bit of transition here. It is awkward to be diagnosing Purdue's center position on April 29th, but that's what we're going to do because we need compelling topics to discuss, and it is compelling, and it is definitely a topic. First of all, it all starts obviously with Travion Williams. I think Purdue is invested fully in Travion Williams. He is their best chance. I think you saw it through the end of this season. A point in time came when Purdue realized its best chance to win was to get Travion Williams the ball. You know, he had a good season, a very good season by a lot of standards, but I think anybody who watched him and has seen him at his best knows he was probably a little bit capable. He was capable of a little bit more, and I think next season, Purdue will hope is that season where it all kind of comes together for him. Much the same way, things came together for Caleb Swanigan his sophomore year. I hate making that comparison because I think there are distinct fundamental differences between the two players and their respective compositions, but obviously that is a comparison that holds a little bit of water because of the type of players they are. The hope would be obviously this is the year everything clicks for Travion Williams. He's more consistent. He's more aggressive. He becomes a little bit of a killer. I think he will tell you that he went back through this season and realized how many opportunities he had to be more aggressive, to be more assertive, that he didn't necessarily capitalize on. And now Purdue needs him to do just that because he has a chance to be one of the best big men in college basketball. He has proven that time and again at his best moments. It's a matter of consistency. It's a matter of a relentless motor. And it is a matter of just him putting everything together. And not only being the best Travion Williams he can be, but making everyone around him better. He is, of course, an excellent passer for a big man. I think sometimes he looked to pass a little bit too much, and I think that falls into the aggressiveness that he himself discussed after the season. But he is a player, too, who can not only be really good himself, but can make the people around him better. He is Purdue's best chance next season. He is their most important player. He is the player they are invested in. They need him to take that next step as a player. Obviously, the last couple of years, his safety net, to put it one way, has been the fact that Purdue has had a couple of really good centers. Obviously, Matt Harm's transfer, ultimately he ends up at BYU, does in fact matter. I know there's a variety of ways to look at this. You can say this was Purdue's backup center who didn't play 20 or more minutes in a game more than once in the final 19 games of the year, whatever it was. He was going to be Purdue's backup center again this year, probably play no more than 20 minutes a game. That being said, that was a luxury that Purdue now doesn't have. You go from a luxury basically to the mean, to what everybody else, if they're lucky, has. He was the exception to the rule. He was a backup, but he was also a starter caliber, to me, all conference type of player. And Purdue will not not miss him. I know that's a double negative, but that is the reality of it, is that Purdue will not feel that loss, in my opinion. Harms is really good. Harms' issue this past year, I think, I've talked about this over and over again. I think the injuries really hurt him. I think style of play, the pieces around him, I think he and Nogel Eastern, both Purdue's two juniors, two most experienced players, I think really things changed for them as everyone, the pieces around them kind of took steps backwards to a certain extent. There wasn't as much talent around them. There wasn't as clearly defined a niche for them to fit into. Purdue, the hope was that both would become something they hadn't previously been. That did not necessarily happen. It was just a very difficult season for both of them. That being said, Matt Harms was still the best backup center in college basketball, most likely, that Purdue now does not have, which thus casts the question, the very point of people asking this question, what happens now? Obviously, Purdue had a tremendous luxury, not just this past season, but a bunch of seasons before that in terms of its depth at center. Purdue was very fortunate at one point in time to have had Isaac Haas, who was okay coming off the bench behind players when he was obviously a great player unto himself. A.J. Hammonds was a really high-level college basketball player late in his career. He came off the bench at points in time. Caleb Swanigan obviously played the four for a while for Purdue. They had three really good centers on the roster at once for a period of years. And then once that happened, in came Matt Harms. Or once that trailed off, in came Matt Harms. On top of him came Travion Williams. After Travion Williams will come Caleb First. Purdue has a really good thing going, recruiting big men, and that has created an obnoxious luxury Purdue's had over the years, where you've had two really high-level centers, if not three at all times on your roster. Now it kind of remains to be seen. This is the first time in a while where you have wondered, hey, what is Purdue going to do at backup center? And it is particularly important for Purdue this year because Travion Williams, as good as he is, as good as he can be, most likely is never going to be a 30-plus minute a game player. That's not the nature of his body type. It's not the nature of his game. A lot would have to happen for him to become that sort of player. I know he played 1,000 minutes in the double overtime game in Ann Arbor and looked pretty damn good offensively doing it at the end there, but also there were some distinct moments where the minutes clearly took a toll on him defensively, and that was an issue in the outcome of that game as well. One more stop and Purdue wins that game. It falls in the lap here of Emmanuel Dewona, who will be a sophomore next year, and Zach Edey, who will be a true freshman next year. Both of them obviously are at different stages of their careers. Both of them have a little bit of a shared history in that Emmanuel Dewona didn't play a whole lot of high-level basketball. Prior to Purdue, he didn't pick up the game until relatively late into his teen years. He played at a school in Florida, a really small school where the level of competition, just the level of basketball wasn't anywhere near what he was coming into at Purdue. So he came into a really raw, really rough around the edges from a skills perspective, from an understanding of basketball perspective, and so on and so forth. And he obviously probably was not in a position this year to help Purdue after the redshirt year the year before. He would have to close that gap pretty significantly next year to be in a position to not only play, but to be trusted. And that's the important part of it. The coaches have to trust the players they put on the floor to do what they're supposed to do, to understand what they're doing, to do it right most of the time. And that is obviously going to be something that remains to be seen with Emmanuel Dewona at this stage of his career. Zach Edey, again, that shared history. This is a guy who was a hockey and baseball player a couple years ago, really has not played a whole lot of basketball, just picked it up a couple years ago, played at a really good program at IMG Academy, played in existed in a professional sort of college environment from a developmental perspective. That being said, he played for one of the best high school teams in the country and didn't play a whole lot. He's been exposed to really high-level competition. He was not necessarily relied on to a meaningful extent from that team. So there is certainly a measure of unknown there. What you do know is he is gigantic. He's all of 7'3" probably, and 250, 260 pounds, whatever it may be. And obviously will have significant upside because of his relative lack of experience playing basketball. I think in a perfect world, you would have had time on your side with Zach Edey where you could have laid him out this year and you could have let him practice and work on his skills and just learn basketball, let alone Purdue basketball. But the Matt Harms transfer obviously casts both of those younger guys into the spotlight earlier than Purdue probably would have preferred. But we'll see where those two guys are. If one or the other can be counted on to play 15 minutes a game and do what they're supposed to do and understand it and, dunk and rebound for lack of a more in-depth job description. Make your dunks, rebound, and defend. That is kind of all you would need out of that position just to get through it. That's the hope. One of those two guys, or both of them preferably, would put themselves in a position to help you right away. Obviously, Purdue has an open scholarship right now. It is looking for players who can come in and help them in the front court, whether it be at center, a backup center, or a forward where things are relatively open too. How that pans out, I have no idea. You've heard me talk about this before, where you have to have a one-year player. You can't promise a starting position necessarily unless it's a power forward who you can say we're wide open there. But in terms of a center, you can't go out and say, hey, you can come start for us. It's very late in the transfer cycle. Purdue was very late to the party. The guys I know Purdue at least reached out to early on were very, very highly recruited players who basically probably wanted some sort of guarantee, for lack of a better term, about what the extent of their role would have been. Wasn't going to happen. Purdue was in a really tough spot there. They can only take a one-year player because they have to protect the 2021 recruiting class. Most likely you have to find a guy who's going to be okay coming in and competing for minutes, or understanding he's probably a backup. That is a very hard thing because the transfer wire is driven by ambition. And I don't know how many people aspire to go be backups on a good team. They aspire to be starters and impact players on good teams. Purdue can offer something that would be attractive to a lot of kids. That's an opportunity to be part of a good team at a high level, to play a role, but that's not something that is going to be the honey that attracts a lot of bees, so to speak, because a lot of these guys and it's their right to go find the best situation for themselves. They want prominent roles at a high level. Purdue can only offer that to a certain extent. So it is really hard for me, to be honest with you, to foresee Purdue finding somebody, especially this offseason, where you can't go meet the kid can't come to you, the kid can't meet his teammates. You might not even see this person in person until the fall at the earliest. It's just a really difficult position, especially for a coach like Matt Painter, who covets familiarity, knowing the people he's bringing into his program, understanding where things fit from a team chemistry perspective. This is really an un-Painter-like situation, going to reach for a player who you don't really have a chance to get to know before you bring him into your program. I would be surprised if Purdue adds anybody. I've been wrong before, but I would be surprised if Purdue added anybody. The nuclear option here, if the two young bigs aren't ready to carry out a scouting report, to do what they're supposed to do, to understand things to the extent to which Purdue will need them to understand it, and Purdue doesn't get somebody who can come in and help right away, the nuclear option here, you do wonder if Purdue has any options to play really small for a couple minutes a game, just to kind of change things up a little bit. I've said this before, and readers tend to make fun of me, that what about Mason Gillis? Can he just go out there for 5 or 6 minutes a game at most, perhaps, and be like a matchup-based five? A five and a center are not the same thing in college basketball anymore. This is largely the same Purdue coaching staff in terms of Matt Painter and Micah Shrewsbury both being on the staff right now, that in 2011 moved Robbie Hummel to center, and in no way, shape, or form did he actually play center. He might have guarded the center, but he did not play like a center. They made people chase him around the perimeter. They created matchups, and they exploited it accordingly. The reason I bring up Mason Gillis is because he does have a little bit of perimeter skill to him for a kid in a 220 plus pound body who's relatively physical, relatively strong and tough, and a high motor guy, so to speak. He can throw his body around a little bit. He'll be rugged enough to potentially compete in there. Purdue doubles the post anyway defensively, so if you really get stuck having to guard the post, there are workarounds to that. Is he at a place in his Purdue career right away where he can be a good enough offensive player on the perimeter to really exploit those kind of matchups? You don't know. But if that's what it comes down to, if you can create some matchup advantages there, maybe play a different way, play smaller, play faster, whatever it might be, you never know. I'm only speculating on this, but this is the same staff that moved Robbie Hummel to center in 2011, and it saved the season. I'm not comparing Mason Gillis as a redshirt freshman to Robbie Hummel as a sixth-year senior or fifth-year senior, whatever it was. Purdue also, way back in the day in 2007, played Hummel and/or Scott Martin at times at the 5. Also created some offensive matchups, put their best offensive lineup on the floor. It could always be on the radar. You never know. I don't know if Purdue has any other player other than Gillis who might be capable of doing that. I just bring it up just as a, hey, you never know kind of thing. But Purdue does have to find some answers behind Travion Williams to log some of those important minutes in the front court. It's especially important because of the nature of Travion Williams. He has to have a great offseason. He has to get into the best shape of his life. But even if he's in the best shape of his life, you do wonder if he'll ever be that 25, if he'll ever be a player who can carry that 25 to 28 minute or go beyond that 25 to 28 really high level minute mark. Purdue will certainly hope so. Purdue could really use it if he does. But I think Purdue does have to find some answers behind him in its front court. And that's what part of this stunted offseason will be about. And when practice opens up in the fall, provided practice does open up in the fall, that will obviously be something worth monitoring. I do think Purdue stands to really improve from one season to the next year. I do think the Matt Harms thing hurts them. I do think it creates a void right now that it does have to fill. It creates one of the prominent questions when you look at Purdue on paper. Purdue has to find answers there, and I'm talking in circles now, so I'm just going to stick this landing. And thank everybody for watching. Thank you for listening, and thank you for reading. However you are ingesting this stuff, thank you for doing so. This has been your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine for Wednesday. It has been brought to you by Fowler's Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remaxability Plus. If you're looking for a good dinner tonight, want to support our local businesses, go check out the 6th Street Dive in Lafayette, Arnie's all over the state, Bruno's in West Lafayette, the Whitaker Inn in West Lafayette. All of them are open for carryout and would love to hear from you, I'm quite certain. So thanks, everybody. Take care.